Black like me. Black like me. Black like me.
You're listening to Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G., a podcast that invites you to experience the world through the perspective of one black man, one conversation, one story, or even one rant at a time. Here's Dr. G.
Hey, good people. I want to welcome you back to another exciting episode of Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G. Now, each time I drop an episode, I let you all know that it's my goal to bring you an exciting and scintillating conversation with incredible people who are doing amazing things around the way. And today is no disappointment. I've been having this idea called power couples. You know, these folks who are in relationships, they're married, and, you know, they're doing these fantastic things to bring about change in the community. And so, you know, a few of these folks have come to mind. I wanted to have this conversation with Doctors Charleston, Dr. LaVar J. Charleston, and his wife, Dr. Sherri Ann Charleston. Dr. Sherri Ann Charleston serves as the first Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer, the CDIO at Harvard University. Dr. Charleston is a historian trained in U.S. history with a focus on race, women, gender, citizenship, and law. So also, she's an attorney with a specialization in constitutional and employment law. Y'all see what I'm talking about? And this is just the first half. Most recently, she served as the Assistant Vice Provost for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and Chief Affirmative Action Officer at the University of Wisconsin, Madison. We'll put other information about her work in there, but she received her BA from Columbia University in History and African American Studies, her MA and PhD in History from the University of Michigan, and her JD from the University of Wisconsin Law School. Bam. Dr. LaVar Charleston, Ph.D., is the Deputy Vice Chancellor for Diversity and Inclusion at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. In his role, he serves as the Chief Diversity Officer for the university, as well as the Elzie Higginbottom, Vice Provost and Director of the Division of Diversity, Equity, and Educational Achievement. In his role as the Chief Diversity Officer, Dr. Charleston provides overall leadership for the university's efforts to create a diverse and equitable and inclusive learning and working environment for all students, faculty, staff, alumni, and others who work with the university. Along with the staff of his department, he partners with leadership in the university schools, colleges, and divisions, as well as shares in the governance groups to create policies and promote equity and social justice while fostering a sense of belonging for all the members of the UW-Madison community. See, this is why I talked about them being power couples, being a power couple. Doctors Charleston, how are you all doing today?
Doing well.
Fantastic.
Can't
I know
complain.
y'all are.
Can't complain.
I know you all are. My goodness, they need to name a universe. My jaw is tired from saying all that stuff, all these letters and stuff behind the names. You put all this stuff together. But listen, I love celebrating.
That's not me. That's the other Dr. Charleston. He's got the super long title.
But Doc, you right, Columbia, right, University of Michigan, Wisconsin Law School.
Oh,
so
you know, come on.
Nah, he's got three jobs.
Definitely. I got you. See, this is why I love this whole idea of these power couples. And so listen, I want to just jump into having some meaningful conversation with you all. But as I do on my podcast, I love to start off with just a couple of icebreakers. So if you all would indulge me, all right, I'll start off with the one I always ask everyone: grits or cream of wheat?
Grits
all day long.
If they're my grits.
Yeah, her grits are so good everywhere we go. When we go to family members' homes, friends' homes, if
they want it,
she is commissioned to make the grits in the morning.
Now, do you do the Quaker ones, Quaker brand, or do you do the slow grits? What I really want to know is, do you put butter and sugar in them or salt, Dr. Sherri?
Okay, so definitely no sugar, because if you do sugar, then you might as well do cream of wheat. It's a different cereal.
Wow.
5-minute grits or stone grits doesn't really matter to me. I like the 5-minute grit because it's smoother. You can make it smoother with the right ingredients.
Gotcha. And so because I know people eat it with like fish and shrimp, but you also enjoy it as a breakfast food also?
I have been known to do shrimp and grits. I've been known to do like grits with catfish. You know, we've had grits with various dinner configurations, breakfast configurations. It's a
Oh,
savory
So,
side.
so one of my favorites that she make is she'll do this. She'll do grits and catfish and homemade biscuits. You know, she puts cheese
oh
in the grits. Oh
man.
man, I am hungry right now.
I am too. And I like grits with butter and sugar. I like to break my toast up in it, scramble my eggs over in it, and then break my bacon up in it. But I don't even like fish. And that's the grits and catfish sounds good.
It's fire. It's fire.
Oh my goodness. Oh my
We'll
goodness.
forgive you. We'll forgive you for using
Please do.
sugar.
Please do. Dr. Sherri, growing up, Dr. Sherri, did you have family that put plastic on their furniture in the front room?
Oh, absolutely. My grandmother's living room furniture was tightly wrapped in a hard plastic, all except for the one seat that my grandfather sat in. Whatever seat that he sat in, that was the only seat that he would not allow plastic to be on.
Because he didn't want to stick to it when it was hot.
He didn't want to stick to it. He didn't like the crunchiness of it. And so as a result, my grandmother would rearrange the furniture periodically so that his chair was not the one rough looking chair in the house. It was a whole system.
Oh my goodness.
If I may, there's a quick
please, young man.
A testament to the quality of the type of furniture and that plastic. And Sherri will remember this. Our first home, we had this duplex here in Wisconsin. Our furniture was the same furniture that my mom grew up with, that was in that plastic in the living room.
Real furniture.
In my grandma's house. You know, we were very poor. And so she gifted us that furniture, and we had it until we moved into the last move, right? Which was about 5 years ago. So that's a testament to that plastic and to the quality of that furniture back in the day.
Oh my goodness. All right. I love that. I love it. LaVar, Dr. Charleston. I'm so sorry. Dr. LaVar Charleston. Yes, are you familiar with the term tender-headed?
Yes, I'm familiar with that term. I'm
not asking you if you were tender-headed. Okay, I'm just asking. Yes. What does tender-headed mean?
That means that, you know, when you're getting your hair done and you're getting it combed, and you know it hurts, you cry. You know, sometimes you just, you know, it's not the greatest experience, and so you would rather not, you know, be sitting on the floor or in that chair getting your hair combed. You know, if it doesn't work out for you, if you end up with tears in your eyes, it probably means you're tender-headed.
Oh my goodness, y'all got me over here crying. Oh my goodness, that is so funny. Dr. Sherri, did you ever get syllable spankings when you were growing up? You know, like when your parents
not do that no more. You mean like every pop, you know, is corresponding. So yes, but I was the baby of the family, and so generally speaking, I maintain that I was an angel.
I got you. I love it.
Hence all the challenges I had.
Like you needed some more. You needed a few more syllables. You needed a few more syllables. So y'all listen, finish this sentence. Now, this might be my generation, because what I'm finding is with these Black icebreakers, people love it because it shows the synergy between Black folks and our Black culture. Whether you're from Detroit or Wisconsin or Florida, it's interesting how similarly we answer these questions. And so this is actually one of the favorite features of the show, because the non-Black listeners are just blown away that they don't have these similarities. So this might be more age-based. But can y'all finish this sentence? I ain't got to do nothing but stay Black and what?
Die.
Oh my God. You know what? Every time I do this, I mean, I've been doing this show. We had like 150 episodes, y'all.
Congrats.
I love asking these questions because it keeps making me, thank you, but it keeps making me think there was something so strong in us that we held these sayings and these beliefs together, which is really, really, really amazing, man. I love that. Let me see. I could do so many of these things, but I won't uh, Dr. Sherri, have people ever asked in higher ed to touch your hair?
Oh, not in higher ed here in Madison. People have, occasionally tested my matrix skills, tried to reach out and touch
Just
me.
put their hands in your hair like that's what you want. Like you got up that morning saying, I want nubby fingers up in my hair.
Yeah, it's happened a couple times where people do the extended reach, that they're coming in, and then you just have to matrix back. It's happened.
To the matrix.
Yep.
To the matrix. Now, this may be generational too, Dr. LaVar, and this might be my last one because man, this is so much fun. But like it was interesting. Like Black folks were taught certain ways about hygiene and stuff, because I think a lot of us came out of poverty. Our parents wanted to make sure we were, that we just took care of ourselves. Mm-hmm. But like we got like showering age, like we found out like in gym class and sports, like some people, like we were taught like to use wash rags and stuff, but not everybody did. Yeah. Some people just like share like bars of soap. So like growing up, like do you know what a washcloth is?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like
no, you know what a loofah is. Don't even play. You don't know what a washcloth is. You know what a loofah.
Look, you go to hotels these days and we like, well, what a washcloth. They expect you to take that bar of soap and do it like a Zest commercial. I'm gonna need that wash rag. I got a soap rag and put the soap down and then wash me to where I'm all sudsy and then rinse everything off.
Then rinse everything. Ooh, I think my grandma used to call it a butt towel. So like there was a face towel, a hand towel, a butt towel. Yeah. And so, man, okay. All right. Y'all mess with me today. This is so, man, I love it. I love it, you all. And again, but I also love the fact that in everyday life, we have these cultural things that hold us together. So I love that piece. One of the things that Dr. Christy Clark-Bajar says is that slavery did not destroy Black people because we created culture and we created these connections, and you can't do that if you're destroyed. So I thank you all for letting me do that. I appreciate it. One of these times I'm going to do like the best of, and y'all are definitely going to be on it.
You say that to all your guests.
No, because I didn't know younger people knew some of this, and so I love this. So we're gonna get into what you all do for work, but let me ask you, who was attracted to who first?
Oh, that's probably me all day long. Look, so here's the thing. We're both from Detroit, Michigan. We went to the same high school, and I was always attracted to her. And, she wasn't really feeling me like that because I was captain of the football team, and we were different.
No. I would just want to correct the language on that.
My goodness.
It is not you. It wasn't that I was not attracted to you because you were the captain of the football team.
I was getting to it.
You just weren't attracted.
But the way you phrased it, no, that wasn't it at all. I thought that there were other ladies who had his attention.
I was getting there. So what I was going to say was that because I did these things, I was in the band, captain. I was in the band. I had a singing group. I was in a dancing group. I was captain of the football team, which sort of made for a popular crew.
Sure. Sure.
And she assumed that because others were perhaps attracted to me, that maybe I was attracted to them as well, when I wasn't. I was attracted to her.
Got you.
And I did let that known, but she was already, taken at the time. But I did let her know, let it be known that I was attracted to her. And I didn't get that same response. So
were you all friends before you dated?
Absolutely.
Yes.
We didn't date to 8 years after high school graduation or college graduation. 8 years after high school graduation. But we were friends. We rode in some of the same circles, we're definitely friends. We even have some moments that we've shared that we've been able to uncover through pictures and just memories that I sort of forgot about until we started dating again and realized that we were probably better friends than we thought we were. Yeah.
That's
I'll tell you quickly, he wrote in my memory book, I wish we had gotten to know each other I think he said, I'm paraphrasing, I wish we had gotten to know each other better, but who knows what God has in store for us in the future.
That was in 97. And then we reconnected
What?
in probably 2004.
That's
Yeah,
25 years ago. 24, 25 years ago.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. That was
Wow.
yep.
yep.
That's it,
So
man.
God ordained.
Yeah, that's amazing, you all.
Yeah.
So I'm so impressed with what you all have done academically, what you've done professionally, that you both are in these chief diversity, inclusion, belonging roles at major universities. Dr. LaVar is at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Dr. Sherri is at Harvard. Um, and you all have sort of this same thing that's going on. And what people might not realize who are listening is that in academia, it is not uncommon for couples to live in different parts of the country because of where they get tenure, where they get work, or where they want to work. So it's not quite that unusual. When I worked for the University of Wisconsin years ago, I found that people lived here in New York or here in Chicago. So that was just this new concept. So I think the fact that you two have been doing this for a few years is really intriguing. And so I love that. And so let me ask you, with what each of you is doing, at your respective universities, did that level of support or the kinds of programming that you oversee exist for you, particularly when you were undergrads?
I guess go ahead. You want
Dr.
to start?
No,
LaVar,
no, go
you were
ahead.
at Ball State, right?
I was
Dr.
at
LaVar?
Ball State, right? And I think that, there were certain pockets. In fact, my initial exposure to this work probably happened in these pockets. There was an Office of Admissions and Early Outreach Programs that really was
They used to be
around.
called.
Yeah, right. Back in the day, right? Oh, you know about, because you were in admissions, right, Dr.
Sure.
G? So, and so we handled our now I'm drawing a blank on the like the upward bound kinds of the trio programs from the education. And so that kind of exposed me to that. It was also through my fraternity. So it was all these spaces of community that I kind of found out by happenstance or through my fraternal organization, which the assistant director there in that office was a member of my fraternity. And I ended up getting an internship in that office, which exposed me to that. Aside from that, as it relates to sort of university-wide, there may have been, I played football as well too. So I didn't, there may have been things I wasn't exposed to, but nowhere near the level of attention. I don't think we had, certainly chief diversity officers were not a thing back then. And I don't know that they paid much attention to diversity aside from some of our student organizations and or, like offices that were designed to bring in kids from first generation households or historically marginalized households, and students of color. That intentionality behind some of those pre-college programs that were pipelines to higher education. Aside from that, we didn't see that. In fact, I'll leave with this, not to hog the air, but one of the things I wanted to do when I became an administrator was demonstrate to students the tangibility of folks in these roles, and that we're people just like you, right? And also that does a couple of things. One, for them to see representation at that high administrative level creates or facilitates possibilities for them, and two, to demystify what it means to have a PhD or a doctoral degree or a law degree and be a leader in these spaces, them seeing themselves that will facilitate exposure. That means that they could do it too. If you could do it, I can do it, kind of thing. And so that was really, really important to me in moving to the administrative space.
Yeah.
Sure.
No,
Notice?
I would. Yeah. I think it's hard to think back. And so this is such a great question. I think a couple things is important to keep in mind. One, that um, it, chief diversity officers are a fairly new phenomena in higher education, as LaVar was saying. And so many of us, the reason why we're first generation, so people like me who are first generation CDIOs at our institutions, is because institutions are now starting to think about this work through a prism of strategy. And I think heretofore, the sort of the history of it is, tied to the way we think about affirmative action, federal legislation. We think about, equity growing out of that. But this new phenomenon of thinking about diversity, inclusion, belonging as a holistic entity and enterprise is sort of new. So when I think back, there were, as LaVar was saying, programs that were targeted towards first generation students, low income students at Columbia, but I wasn't thinking about it in the same way that I think about it now. But you had those people, many of whom were just the champions and champions for
That's right.
people of color who were starting these initiatives, leading these programs, leading these efforts, and for the most part are responsible for the level of diversity that schools experience. Shout out to Peter and Diane from the Columbia admissions team who created some of the most diverse classes of students in the history of that university, and other people at other institutions who've done the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, that just reminded me, just real briefly too. I mean, think about
take your time.
The way, here, Mercille J. Lee is one of the scholarship programs that are housed in my portfolio here. Started with just 6 students with the vision of Mercille J. Lee, Dr. Mercille J. Lee, who thought to sort of recruit talented students of color, right? And now it's a very important program, one of the premier programs at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, that brings in diverse students, who are highly talented folks, and that helps us to diversify our student population here. Contributes heavily to that diversity in our student population here on campus as well now. So they were the forerunners of this work that oftentimes started from individuals doing, with individual passions to promote equity. And what we've been able to do with these sorts of positions is bring it under a particular strategy and particular focus that's part of a larger approach to creating equitable and inclusive working and learning environments at our institutions.
Sure. One of the concerns is that when you bring in a chief diversity executive like yourselves, that it's easier for universities or institutions to rest on its laurels and say, well, we've got Dr. LaVar, we've got Dr. Sherri, they handle that. They watch out for that. They do the white glove test. They are our conscience. They're going to tell us when we're doing something or saying something wrong. Do you struggle with your respective institutions thinking that it is solely your responsibility to look out for the DEI initiatives for your universities?
Oh, I could jump in first. The short answer is no. I mean, when I first got there, I went on a, stump. I did my stump tour kind of thing.
Sure.
And, one of the things that I kept saying is that this is not going to be my responsibility. This is going to take all of us. We cannot boil an ocean. We cannot expect to boil an ocean, and we can't. So, we're not going to do this without everybody pitching in and doing their part, because culture, as my sister and colleague Latasha Brown says, culture eats strategy every day for breakfast.
Yes.
And the only way you change culture is having people do that, helping to do that work together as a community. That, and I work in a very decentralized institution. So no one does anything on their own. We are constantly working to work together.
Yeah, I mean, and just to add, myself and my colleague, who's also my spouse and my thought partner, we brain wrestle a lot together. We'll always say that, structure plus habits equals culture, right? So what are the structures that either promote or impede us to realizing our diversity related goals? What are the habits or the actions that help us get there or prevent us from getting there? So I think Sherri and I were both in places in our career where, if that was the case, Dr. G, whereas we were being looked upon as a token or as a symbol, we would not have taken these jobs, right? I frame it in that we both work in large decentralized institutions, population over 70,000 faculty, staff, and students here at UW-Madison. And our goal, our strategy, our approach is that we are all in the same regatta, rowing in the same direction, right? And that diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, social justice, racial justice, it's everyone's responsibility. right? Not just a single individual. And so we've been working, extensively. I know she has, and I have too. We work a lot closely together, particularly on our strategy. We've sort of written and presented some things, and we have a very, very similar approach to this work. To have a distributed model of leadership, right? That means that while we may be the chief diversity officers in our respective spaces, there are lots of allies and folks who have been deputized to do this work in their own schools and colleges and units and divisions that are also replying or responding up or reporting up to senior levels like deans and vice provosts and vice chancellors and things of that nature. I think that the field is beginning to realize that, this sort of Band-Aid approach and the sort of just because you're a person of color or you're LGBTQ or you're a woman or whatever the case may be, whatever intersecting identity you have, meaning you can do the diversity work. That's not the case anymore. You're really getting people who have some skills and experiences and who have done some research and have done the work to understand what it means to be a strategic diversity leader and to help move an entire complex, decentralized institution into a space of organizational and inclusive excellence, what we might call.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love it. I've noticed a trend in recent years where there are more African-American people, Black and brown people, but because this is Black Like Me podcast, I can talk about Black people and what's happening with us. Sure. I remember when these positions were largely held by white women. I remember when what was called affirmative action, something we don't necessarily say a lot nowadays. There was some ruling, it might even come out of the University of Michigan. I think there's some things out someplace in California where people were saying that they were questioning the constitutionality of trying to recruit underrepresented groups. But to see this advance, to see more people, as you said, Dr. LaVar, with lived experience in these spaces, not only relating to the students that you recruit or the faculty and staff that you're trying to retain, but for you to also be a voice inside the institutions to think differently about students or the underrepresented groups that they want to have, because it makes the university better. It makes it more world-class. That's not an easy feat, because although we have these goals, not everyone's practices really line up with doing this. And so how do you all refresh yourselves in this work where you have this mandate from your chancellor or the leadership team, or maybe down from the Board of Regents like here in Wisconsin, and then there's the assumption because you're Madison or because you're Harvard, you're these bastions of liberal thinking, of progressivism, progressive thought. But you got to motivate people without always telling on people. You got to lift the standard without being, it's all about me. And sometimes people think that these roles are cush positions, but
oh my goodness,
you're doing too much for some and not enough for others. How do you all balance that and take care of yourselves in the midst of trying to help these universities maintain what they're saying they want to have in terms of a diverse group of people who feel a deep sense of belonging?
You want to go first,
No,
Dr. Charleston? Okay.
No, you go ahead.
It's funny. It's funny that you say that, and it's part of us taking a page out of our own books. Myself, Dr. Charleston, a colleague of ours, Dr. Cheryl Gittens, once did this presentation at the National Conference on Race and Ethnicity around student activism, right? And the lessons that we can learn from student activism. There's a simple formula that I would provide students, because a lot of times, students come on campus, they're activists, and it takes up all of their time, right? And their academics suffer, their personal lives, their mental health suffer, and they're trying to fight all these causes around equity. And it's a simple equation that I have, and that I think that I sort of apply to myself similarly. It's educate to activate, right? People activate in different ways, right? But you have to learn something, you have to know something, you have to educate to activate, re-energize, and utilize allies. So when we talk about this distributed model of leadership, right? I try very hard, and I'm not going to speak for Sherri here, she can speak for herself, to not bear the brunt and burden of all of our issues around equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging, social justice, racial justice, right? Because if I did, I would beat myself to a pulp and wouldn't
Sure.
be good for anyone. And in a lot of cases, whether it's fair or not, in these sorts of positions, you've got to be on 10 always, right?
Yes.
Even when things are happening in society that is impacting you, we think about what has just happened in Buffalo, New York, that affects my community, that affects my soul. We're in positions to uplift the community, right? To provide encouraging words, to inspire a shared vision. So the time that I have to take to do that is on my own time. And oftentimes people know what we do. So even outside of work, people want us to talk about these things. So how do we refresh and how do we stay well? I think that is one of the benefits of having a partner like Sherri, because that, we get into spaces, when you think about that we don't always live in the same space and we're working bi-coastal. I realized this, and I just said this to her the other day, there is a stress release, a relaxation, a rejuvenation that happens just when she's in the same room as me, right? Because the weight of the world, the weight of my job, I don't have to be on time. I don't have to smile. I'm a big, folks, the listeners might not know, I'm 6'4", over 300 pounds. I played football, I was an offensive lineman, right? I'm a big guy. And the weight of, you don't think about it because I do it and I do it well and I do it regularly, of disarming folks by my mere appearance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to be able to do this working in the place we work in, being my size and everything back in the days, to have long hair, I don't have any hair anymore, but like
impeccable dresser.
It merits that, in order to convey a shared vision and inspire people, that you have to disarm people. So that's an act that I learned, I think, a long time ago, that has made me actually successful in this work. And then, being in spaces where they're feeding my soul, my community, my fraternity, church, Dr. G, or going to dinner meetings with different groups, and again, just being home, being on the grill, being on the smoker. That is, going to the gym. I like physical activity. I know that you're doing the tennis thing. I'm trying to get back into it, right? Like, right. Those are the things that make me whole and that enable me to keep doing the work that I do. I'm sorry, that was a really long answer.
No. I want to jump in for just a second, Dr. LaVar. You talked about how we have to work on disarming people. I was at a meeting a few weeks ago, and leaving a restaurant. One of my buddies and I were having dinner, so I was leaving out. And there was a woman that was walking to her car. She was a white woman walking to her car. So of a dark parking lot, and her car was right next to mine. It was on the other, like on the far side of mine, but it was right next to it. I find that when I walk in the same direction as someone, I hit my button to unlock my doors so that no one thinks I'm following you to your car, to disarm people. And my white friends don't even think about that. But there are things that I do. I can be a half a block away. I'm like, deep, deep. So I'm walking in the same direction. I don't want anybody thinking anything, but that's all part of the disarming too. I mean, this segment is not about this, but can you relate to that? That, like you talking about, like, I'm not 6'4", I'm not near 300, but I'm still thinking I'm Black and I'm male, and people have these perceptions, and I just have to, my battery's going to go out because I've pushed that sucker so much. So I want somebody to know I ain't out here trying to rape no white woman.
We've been conditioned. And I think that because we both move in spaces where we are leaders, that have diverse constituents. Right. And when I'm talking about diverse constituents, I'm talking about white folks in this space, right? And we live and we work in these spaces, and we have to operate. And in order for us to successfully navigate these spaces, it's actually cultural intelligence. People call it code shifting. I used to teach a lesson in my leadership development class. It's cultural competence. It's cultural intelligence, or CQ, right? That learns our spaces. And in order for us as Black men to be able to successfully navigate these things, I think the only benefit that we have from doing that is that we've done it so long and so much, it doesn't wear on us, at least blatantly wear on us as much. And it's more of a natural thing, and we don't have to think about that because we just do it. Like you do it, I do the same thing you're talking about. I do it as well, right? I'm smiling, my voice gets higher. I smile, I speak, all these sorts of things. And
hi, how are you today?
And listen, and it still doesn't stop people. And I'm not the restaurant's going to remain nameless from me walking into a restaurant here, dressed to the nines as I always am, and a white woman clutching her purse when I walk past her.
LaVar, or locking the door with the elbow. I've seen them.
I'm talking it happens now.
LaVar,
and it doesn't
I'm
matter
telling
if I
you,
have a bow tie on, doesn't matter if I have a tag that say University of Wisconsin, Madison. This woman clutched her purse.
And you better not have a white administrative assistant, because I'm just telling you from personal experience, you will walk into a meeting and they will go to shake the hand of your white assistant and say, oh, you must be Dr. Charleston. So don't even get me started.
Hi, this is Amy from Eugene, Oregon. I listen to Black Like Me because I want to hear different perspectives and push myself out of my comfort zone as a white person. I support the podcast as a Patreon because it's an awesome show and I know it takes a ton of work and effort to make it all happen.
Hey, what's up, Black Like Me family? This podcast is changing the conversation about race in America. By going to patreon.com/Black Like Me and signing up at any of the levels offered, you are not only signing up to make a monthly donation, you are also helping to create better content and, more importantly, joining a growing community of people interested in engaging the issue of race with a raw, unprecedented honesty and creating a better society. And as a patron of the podcast, you'll have access to exclusive content like extended interviews, bonus rants, and video chats with Dr. G. You will also have a chance to join the conversation that other patrons are already having with Dr. G about race in America. So to become a patron of the show, go to patreon.com/Black Like Me or see the link in our show notes. And for as little as $2, you can support these important conversations and the work that Dr. G is doing. Thank you in advance.
Dr. Sherri, in a world where you're hundreds of miles from Buffalo like we are, you're closer than we are, but those things pertain to us because of your work and your interest in who you are and who you protect and what you uplift. What kinds of things do you have to do to take care of yourself when you're so immersed in assuring that there's an atmosphere of inclusion and belonging at Harvard University?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So I guess a couple thoughts. One, anybody who has had an opportunity to travel with me will tell you, I think I can run a clinic given the opportunity on how to relax when I need to.
Okay, good.
She
So
taught
there's,
me. She taught me. She's
you
like,
know,
no computer, no laptops.
I'm like, I don't understand why we're paying money to go somewhere and work. So
Right.
like that doesn't make sense to me. Like we should just stay home if we're going to work, because that's what we do here. Why would we pay money to go somewhere and work?
Yes,
but I think that's important because the work that we do, we don't do because it's just a job. We do it because it's, I think, part of our DNA, part of our purpose, part of our mission in life, our life's work. I don't want to speak for LaVar, but I think he shares these sentiments. And so, it's hard to not have those things intertwined with your being because you never escape it. We can be on the beach in Mexico and then find out that there's a killing somewhere here in the country, which has happened.
Sure.
And all of a sudden you're confronted and brought back to reality, and you bear the responsibility of caring for others in your community. And so sometimes it's leading through example. And I'll just say, as Black women, I think that oftentimes when we approach this work, we sometimes approach it almost from a mothering place.
Mhm.
And that's not necessarily my approach to it, but I think a lot of times that is a facet of it. And so there's a self-sacrificing component to the work that I just want to acknowledge and note, because there are many people, women of color, Black women in particular, who carry the work in that way in our bodies. And you think about people who've come through UW-Madison, like Jackie DeWalt, for example, these women who we look to and we say, wow, look at the amount of work and the sacrifice that they made for universities and for all of us. And sometimes we won't ever know the cost. So, I think, remembering that so many of our examples of activism and leadership have been martyrs. And that is not how we sustain the movement long term. And then I'll just say two other things really quickly. I grew up in the Baptist church. Shout out to New Prospect Missionary Baptist Church in Detroit, Michigan, and Nedra Smiley, who directed our Sunbeam Choir. And every Thursday when we would have Sunbeam rehearsal, she would say, as we ended our time, we had to say the same mantra. We would say, "I am but a little, I can do but a little, but what I can do, I will do." And then it went on and said, "I'll praise God with all my voice, with all my strength, and with all my heart." But we're talking about the little people here. We're talking about the 5-year-olds, the 6, 7, and 8-year-olds, and this idea that we each have a little part to do. And I grew up in a church that was led by a civil rights leader, Reverend Dr. Samuel L. Whitney. We all saw ourselves as part of this broader work around civil rights, but there's a very clear sense that we can't do it all. Nobody can do it all. Again, I said I grew up Baptist. Jesus did it all on the cross, but we don't do it all, right? So my point is that we each have a part to play, and recognizing that I'm just doing my part. I am not the final answer. I'm not the one to carry it all. I'm not the answer, the Messiah, any of these things. I am just a little who's doing my part.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say too is that this is a realization that we have as we are both in positions to hire people. People are transitioning in and out of our units. We employ multiple folks, and you realize that if something happened to me today, they replace me tomorrow. We get an interim, and then they replace me tomorrow. I can't kill myself, and I can't do the work if I am killing myself. Now, that's easier said than done, right? I'm learning how to do that. We're still learning how to do that. But that is the mentality that we have to have. The work has to continue, has to be shared. And that's what I meant by, what I was, the saying I was saying before. I don't know if I came full circle, but it's like, we got to use our allies. We got to use our, we have to have a distributed model of leadership. We have to inspire a shared vision. And we have to progress forward, and it's all of our responsibilities. And we have to make sure that folks know that too. And I'll tell you in a minute. No. There's ways in which I can help you in terms of the strategy around diversity, equity, inclusion. But there's a part that you play, one of minimally self-reflection, and two, your unit in your area. So I can't come in here and prescribe exactly what you need to do. There needs to be self-work that you do that has to be rooted in your values, right? So that diversity, equity, inclusion is not seen as an add-on, but more interwoven into the fabric of policies, practices, curriculum, et cetera, programs, interventions, has to be a part of it. So it's not extra work. And that takes work on your end. And I can do as much as I can, but it can't get done unless you do it.
Yes. And when things happen in the world, like what's going on in Buffalo, they have a personal impact on us. And then we have to still stand in places of reconciliation and mediation to believe that we can move ahead. When Saturday happened, after that shooting, I felt off since Saturday. I was in a meeting yesterday. 2 people wrote me in the chat, and one person called me afterwards and said, are you okay? They were wondering if something was wrong with my mother, with my health. And I just think the reality of what was happening in the world, and if this is our new norm, these are things I was just thinking about. So what I want our listeners, many of whom who are not Black, is to understand we don't just turn this on and off. And part of the tension that we hold is that we have to hear the struggles of our spouses, of our children, where it pertains to systemic racism or white supremacy, and then still be an advocate for it for an entire institution. And it's more than a notion. And so for the people who do it like you all, it's phenomenal. It's really phenomenal. Let me ask you, how different are your DEI philosophies? So Dr. Sherri, when you look at what Dr. LaVar is doing at Wisconsin, would you say, you know what, we're all doing good work, but my approach is more, I'm going to work with the faculty or with the community. He's working more with students or student services. I'm just curious, do you, because not every DEI strategy or strategist is the same. Not everyone is the same. So how do you think your strategies might be a little bit different from your husband's?
Honestly, it's because the needs of our institutions
Are so different.
And
Good answer, yes.
The resources that we have at our disposal are different. I don't mean that in terms of financial resources. I mean that in terms of, our greatest resource, which is human capital, is personnel, and structures and infrastructures and all of these other things that we leverage at an organization to help it move forward. And so I think each of us has worked to try to define a strategy that works, that works for our respective institutions. But I'll tell you, the really great thing about having him as a partner, as a thought partner, and as my spouse, is that we have a time where we can actually just work together and think about. I mean, the work is the work.
Sure.
But then we can help one another to sort of strategize about how you move things forward in our respective institutions.
The biggest.
Oh,
sorry. Go ahead. No, I'm sorry.
Let me just ask Dr. Sherri. Right. So you've worked at a public university and at a private. And I know they must be different. And I don't know if I want to say what are the specific. How different is it to go about these efforts when you're in a public institution that's got influence from the legislature, has got a board of regents, and then doing it from a private perspective? Is it more different than what we might guess or believe in? I won't even ask you to put a value on it, whether it's pejoratively different or joyfully different, but how different is it to do this work in a private institution?
It's remarkably different. So our highest governing board, our corporation, we call them our senior fellows, have fiduciary responsibility for the university and have responsibility for helping to guide and steer the institution. And that governing board has continued over time to serve in this capacity for some 400 years. But the people who are selected to serve on that board are fundamentally committed only to the service of the institution, right? Their responsibility is to ensure that Harvard maintains its standing in the world, and that it continues to do so in perpetuity. That's really different from if you think about it from a mission standpoint, from working in a state where the highest level of governance is not perhaps only solely interested in thinking about your well-being as an institution and might be accountable to other constituencies. So I won't opine on what's good or bad. I'll just note that there are some differences. That's
very insightful. That's really insightful. Dr. LaVar, are you going to say something?
I was just going to add to I don't want to take us too far off track, but just, it's interesting. Like, our strategies differ based on institution and the needs of the institution, and the colleagues and our constituents. But there are lots of ways in which we complement one another, but I think it's also because of the training that we have. So Sherri's a historian, right? She has a degree in African-American studies as well. She's an attorney. My background is in public relations, it's in marketing, it's in educational leadership and policy analysis, where I'm looking at organizational leadership and cultural change. And I think the reason why we work so well together and we've even done this in terms of, publishing some work and research as well, is that we put our different lens on the same problem, and we are able to come up with the optimal solution that takes, different and various vantage points and approaches to how to solve a problem. So it enables us, I think, the unique thing it enables us to do is to move into different places and spaces and observe and be able to prescribe how to approach the question or the issue around equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging. That's the benefit to having a thought partner who does the same work, whose training was very, very different than mine.
Mm-hmm. And that's why you all are a power couple, in my in my estimation. Sure. Let me ask you this. This is probably one of the last questions. But many would say that education is the last or the strongest bastion for equality and opportunity for Black people in this country. But it's 2022. Why are colleges still struggling so much to recruit and retain not only Black students, but Black faculty and staff? What's the holdup? Is it leadership? Is it the legislature? Is it funding? Is it relationships? Is it community connections, pipelines? I just love to give you both a chance just to, individually just pontificate a little bit. This is the great portal. This is what our folks fought for, saved for, dreamed of, and some even died for, that their kids could get degrees from these major universities and work in these major universities. But yet we're struggling to get kids into the institution that could really make a world of difference. And so as you just sit in that and you look at our community of Black folks and your desire to have them on campus, but their questioning of whether or not the campus wants them, I guess I just want to ask, with universities providing these opportunities, why do you think colleges and universities struggle so much in recruiting us as students, faculty, and staff, and retaining us?
Let me start, because Sherri's inevitably going to give the better answer. She's just... you got to know your lane. I think it's a really good question. I mean, the short answer is all of the above, right?
Okay.
I mentioned before, our structure plus our habits is what equals our culture. So we're asking ourselves whether or not our structures are set up to support students, faculty, and staff, and how our habits create that culture, right? To promote or impede equity, diversity, inclusion, inclusive working and learning environments, belonging, right? And it is probably more plain to see than we care to admit, as it relates to the initiatives that we are pursuing to remedy some of these challenges. The institutions who have started these initiatives a long time ago, for example, around creating community around Blackness, where there's affinity spaces and groups and having specific things for specific groups, where in some spaces that can be looked as, providing legal challenge, which I'd argue is more political challenges than legal challenges. And people rest on that, the legal piece, when it's really around politics and navigating politics. I'll just leave that there for a second, right? But the institutions that have progressed more have been doing this for a really long time. So I think that in terms of an institution like mine, some of our initiatives around creating belonging are new, right? Are still young, right? But I would say that they're significant and they're ambitious. And I, as a person who's doing this work, has to believe that it's only a matter of time before UW-Madison becomes, a much more of a targeted destination for more and what we're talking about here: Black students, Black faculty, Black staff. We're moving up incrementally, but again, you can't invite people to your house if your living room is dirty. And even if they come, they're not going to stay for a long time because they, it's kind of messed up in here. I'm getting up out of here. Right. So what are the ways in which? So I'll just create a broad stroke umbrella and let Sherri do her thing now.
No, that's good, Dr. Sherri.
So we've had this conversation a number of times. Harvard just launched, announced an initiative that we have been working on for some 2 years, Harvard and the Legacy of Slavery, which is an exploration of the institution's entanglements with the institution of slavery. In response to that initiative, we've rolled out $100 million commitment, which is the beginning of the work to think
Wow.
about how you dismantle that, which is a good, I mean, I commend our institution for doing it. I commend the leadership of our organization, and the dean of the Radcliffe Institute, Tamiko Brown Nagin, who led the initiative. And I note that because Wisconsin is doing similar things, right, through its Public History Project and other efforts to grapple with the history of segregation. I mention these things because they are core to the question that you asked, which is, why is it so difficult? Why is this a problem? It's because these are systemic problems that have systemic roots. If as organizations and as institutions, we have sometimes, and I'll speak on behalf, I won't speak on behalf of my institution, but I will speak to what we're doing at Harvard. If we note in our history that we have systematically, removed members of our community, so that, the medical school, for example, has a history of, admitting three black doctors, one of whom was Martin Delany, who goes on to be one of the greatest thinkers of the 19th century. And he actually he was forced to leave the medical school. These are legacies that we have yet to recover from, that we are steadily working to uncover so that we can do better. But you can't really change what you don't face. And so part of the work is actually having the courage to delve into that history and creating space for both those parts of our legacy and our history that we deeply value and we adore, and those things that are perhaps problematic that still impede us from being the institution that we know that we can be. Now, the second thing I'll say, and this is actually, it goes back to the first point around systemic problems. You asked, is it pipelines? Well, see, I see those pipelines as a repercussion of those systemic problems. And so,
for sure,
so I'm going to say this not as a colleague of Dr. Charleston. I'm going to say this as an alumna of the institution. I have long felt that our state institutions are really well poised to do a lot of this work of remedying some of the entrenched problems we have regarding pipelines. I want to see us do much better in Milwaukee. Honestly, in terms of recruitment to the University of Wisconsin, the same way I want to see the University of Michigan do better from Detroit, and they have done, because these are places that have real, I think, opportunities to create pipelines for members of descendant communities. Now, and I want to talk about descendant communities that descend from slavery, because of where they're situated. But I also want to see institutions like Harvard doing more. We all can do more. My point is that we all have a role to play as we start to do that kind of deep work of thinking about how to crack this nut. But it's a multivariant problem that's going to require multivariant solutions coming from a variety of different places from all of us.
And not to sound too biased, but not to sound too biased, but I do tip my hat to Chancellor Blank and the Public History Project that's going on here at University of Wisconsin Madison. It's doing exactly what Sherri's talking about, right? It's a multi-year effort to sort of uncover and give voice to those who experienced, challenged, and overcame prejudice on campus, right? And some of these things were policies wherein, created policies of discrimination, right? And for us to reckon with that, I think the project's called Sifting and Reckoning is going to be opening in September, display at the Chazen Museum here, right? And it's going to give us an opportunity to really look at historically how we got to some of the spaces we are, and importantly, how do we upend or remedy, right, or come in on the other side of addressing some of those concerns to, one, at least make sure that we are not repeating history, right, and that we are moving into spaces that really address the problems that has been raised and brought up, and just owning that. A colleague and mine were talking about this the other day, and it's like, yeah, it's about to be really painful, right, to think about some of the things that we've done as an institution. But you know what we have to do? We've got to hug this thing. this is who we are. We're not proud of it, but these are the ways in which we are addressing these issues and the ways in which we're turning the corner to ensure that everyone who enters the proverbial university walls knows that they are here both on purpose and for purpose, and that they indeed belong here. And that's work that we have to continue to do. We can't do that without understanding how we got here. Right.
I love
that's what people don't want to talk about. Right. That's the challenge with a lot of folks.
Yeah. I was interviewed for that history project. And I remember when I can't think of the woman's name who's heading that up. The chancellor appointed her.
Casey yes. Butcher. Yep.
Right. She interviewed me, and I talked to her about being in the academic advancement program in the early 80s. And we used to be at 905 University Avenue, which is Granger Hall now. And they moved us into LNS because my advisors were threatened. The FBI had to get involved, and they named them. Wow. They named them. And she said, wait, I've never heard that. And I said, well, I mean, what do you mean you never heard of it? That was knowledge. I mean, these were folks who worked in this student support program, and then they got moved to letters and science and, got the status of assistant deans, but their lives were threatened. They said, we're going to do this to this Black woman, and Tony, Kashina, this Indian, this is how they were saying, and we're going to do this to this, to this,
wow.
They named them, named ethnicity and what they were going to do to them. And so and they still got up and came to work every day to make sure people like me graduated in 4 years. I was not regularly admissible to Wisconsin. Wow. Those folks got me out of here in 4 years, but their very lives were threatened. Wow. And they did it for the students. So you're right. We do have to embrace that, because that puts a whole nother thought on what people may consider about special admissions programs, because their graduation expectations were exactly the same. My admission requirements might have been a little different because I helped the university's diversity plan, but the graduation expectations are exactly the same.
Yes, sir.
Hey, lastly, I want to ask you all, and I've enjoyed this so much. Dr. Sherri, who was your favorite teacher growing up? Because you both work in education, and not that you're instructors, but you do it through your work anyway. But because you're in this educational world, I'm just curious, what teacher would you point to and just say that teacher had an impact on helping me to think differently about myself and my world? Does anyone come to mind for that?
When you say teacher, you mean K-12?
And if it's a professor, it can be a professor too. But I'm thinking, not more in an academic setting, not necessarily personal role models, but someone in K-12 or even college.
Hands down. Barbara Jean Fields, Professor Barbara Jean Fields from Columbia University, is one of my all-time favorite academics. If people have not read her work on the history of race, is life-changing for me, because it helped me to understand that what we think about as racial identity actually had a history to it, and set me on my path as a scholar who studies the history of race. And she's, and she's a fun person to boot. I'll just say that.
I love it. We have to make sure is she still living? Is she still active?
She is still living. We
have to make sure you have to make sure that she gets this and here's that shout out. You, Dr. LaVar.
Oh, easy. Willie Mae Gibson. She is, I've had the pleasure. She was my 8th grade English teacher. We were taught from the ACT book, and she held us accountable.
Wow.
Demanded nothing but excellence. And if we did not reach those, she had this thing called an infraction center. And it was the big cardboard box in the corner. And you would have to go to the infraction center if you were not keeping up and holding up your end of the educational bargain. She has influenced the lives of so many. She retired a few years ago. There's a big celebration. I mean, the students that some of my colleagues that she has taught are just widely successful in every field, of human endeavor, as we say in my fraternity, the Kappa Alpha Psi, the greatest fraternity in the world. Shout out real quick.
Wow.
Yeah, I had to do that to you.
You guys wear purple, right?
That's very funny. That's very cute of you. Because I could ask you if y'all wore pink and green, but then you wouldn't like that, would you?
I'd rather wear pink and green than purple.
Yeah. Wow. I'll stick to my crimson and white. Ooh, somebody gonna get you for that.
Somebody gonna get me. They gonna get me. They gonna get me. Listen, you all.
Wait, before we cut.
Yes, ma'am.
I want to amend my answer. You all just made me think of something. If I could add another.
Please.
Because I should have said this. Marilyn McCormick.
I thought that's who you were going to say.
I don't know what I was thinking.
I thought that's who you were going to say.
Marilyn MC McCormick. Marilyn McCormick is a teacher. She just recently retired from Cass Technical High School. She was my debate coach. Honestly, if it was not for her, I never would have even thought about Harvard as a path. She put us little kids in a van and would carry us to the Harvard National Debate Tournament and all these other debate tournaments all across the country, and made us, these students from Detroit Public School, feel like we belonged, competing with all of these great schools, and we did. And we came in and we ranked. And if it, and I could take the rest of this show listing the number of people from Cass Tech who have gone on to major careers in theater. Dominique Morisseau, who just won the MacArthur Genius Award, is on Broadway now as one of her students. I mean, we could run down the list.
Nico, Angela Lewis. I mean, these folks are all over the TV, all kind of networks and winning all kinds of awards and doing everything. Yeah,
I'm glad you amended that.
She took little Black children, little white children, little Hispanic, Latinx students, and really gave us a path and gave us a passion, and more than anybody else told us we could do it.
Yeah.
So shout
out to all these teachers that are loving us. I love it. All right, folks, I told you this was going to be a great conversation. My special guests have been Doctors Charleston, Dr. LaVar J. Charleston, and Dr. Sherri Ann Charleston, great diversity executives at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and Harvard University, respectfully, and their insights and this conversation about higher ed and what's happening in our Black community and pipelines and how we work together and think about diversity, inclusion, and belonging was just phenomenal. As always, I invite you to listen, to lean in, to learn, to share, to subscribe, to support, because I believe that information is very, very powerful. Dr. Charleston said we educate to activate. And I think that this is so important. So listen, people in higher ed or people who need to hear this, repost it, tweet it out, put it on Instagram, the social media stuff. Help us share this information, because this is something that people need to hear and be inspired by. Thank you for being a part of Black Like Me podcast with Dr. Alex G. I look forward to hearing your comments about this particular episode, and I look forward to dropping so many more exciting episodes. Hey, you have a great day, and thank you so much for your support.
Black Like Me. Black Like Me.
Now, I've got some special shout outs to the many talented members of our ever-growing production team. Eli Steenlich, who produces the show and handles all of our social media. Don Thornton, my podcast manager, who keeps things running smoothly and arranges all of my interviews. Jeremy Holiday, who edits the podcast. Corey Saffold, who created this year's theme music, and Marcus Fleming on the vocals. And of course, Jakesha Hunt, who is responsible for our fabulous new podcast merch.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. You can find out more about Dr. Alex G's amazing work at alexg.com. Black Like Me is sponsored by the generosity of the Human Family Unity Foundation. Black Like Me.